They're used to it. They get it all the time. Like, that's kind of I was gonna say, if the hail's not baseball size, they don't consider it hail. It's just like, no, it's just like cold rain. Yeah, it's a cold rain. It's hard water. Water's a little hard tonight.
Yes, so within facilities.
The PS public safety broadband technology. I got no input from them. Oh, my invoice for right. Allison tomorrow.
Feel are the most important projects and how to invest the funding wisely that's going to be available. We're going to show you things that we developed during the last several meetings. We're going to show you some of the voting. You've received some of this information via email. Christy sent some out today. I sent something out last night, kind of a summary. There are 3 concepts that we developed after the second Spark session based on recommendations that we heard, so we'll talk about those a little bit. We're going to read through the goals. They're on the back of the agenda, and then we're going to give a little bit of an opportunity for anybody in the audience to make any comments before we go through the ideas that were developed. So the goals for success: be in compliance with the codes of the state of Iowa, consolidate services in one location with sufficient space for all departments, provide space and infrastructure that increases staff efficiencies, provide flexible meeting room and office space, improve safety and security for staff and public, increase efficiency of building systems, separation of courts and jail from the public and other services, update technology and infrastructure for today's uses, a structurally sound and watertight building, reduce building maintenance requirements, improve public access and convenience, and some of those through ADA accessibility, designing for COVID, single level building, one location, and then provide a controlled environment for historic document archive, accommodate and plan for future growth and change, preserve the historic.
I don't think I probably need a microphone. I have a pretty loud voice.
Okay, if you can stand by the owl, then we'll make sure that we can hear you online.
Okay, so my name is Laura McNally, and just so you're not beguiled or anything, I am the city clerk of Kensett. I have been for almost 30 years. I'm here representing myself, not the mayor, not the council, just my own personal opinion, so I don't want that to be involved in what I speak at all. At a council meeting this winter, we were presented with an option to possibly move EMA to Kensett, incorporating the Kensett Community Center. There was no decisions made that night, of course, because that was the early planning stages, and it was information gathering only. Well, I got to attend the first meeting, and I had to miss the next 3. And I don't know where the process is or not. I have no idea. But I wanted my opinion out there because I have one. It was stated that night that a garage would have to be built onto this building, most probably to house a trailer. And in my opinion, if you're going to build a garage, why not start everything from scratch so you get it the way you want it? Okay? And I don't even know if this has been brought up at all, but all the property south of the city shed, the old ball diamond, would be up for grabs to do anything, build anything, whatever you wanted there. Just not here at the community center. I've had a lot of comments from people in town saying, well, we can't get rid of our community center. That's where we gather. That's where we have our picnic. That's where our evacuation place is. If we did let the community center go, the biggest facility we would have to house anybody for any kind of a gathering would be like the city hall, which would hold 50 people. So my humble opinion, leave us the community center. All towns need a gathering place, evacuation place. I don't care how big or small you are. Build something new south of our city shed, take the city shed, we don't care. Now, let me rephrase, my opinion. It's fine. But leave us our community center, our Freedom Rock, and our bus stop where we have up here for the kids. And that's, like I said, I don't know where the planning stages are, but, and I don't know if that option was even brought up to you guys that were here about building something over there. I just wanted to throw that out as an idea. That's all.
Okay, this gentleman raised his hand.
Yes, sir, would you like a microphone?
I don't need myself. My name is Don Anderson. I'm just here representing myself, although I am a member of the Historical Society. And when I was on city council for 10 years, we did a lot of work preserving our Main Street buildings. We started a program, a grant program, to preserve and protect our Main Street, and it's a source of pride for our community. And I talk to people from all over that come to Northwood. They stop out at the casino and see the ad, come to Northwood because of our Main Street. And it brings a lot of business, a lot of people to town. Old buildings like our courthouse, an 1893 Victorian brick building, you cannot destroy something like that. That's just sacrilege. You're never going to rebuild it, anything like that, and we can't replace a building like that with some box. Might be cheaper, I don't know, I don't care. If my taxes go up, if it's more expensive to save that building, that's fine. Raise my taxes, I don't care. We cannot do that. There's got to be a way to save this. I'm not a county employee, so I don't know all the ins and outs. Their office space, handicap accessibility, and those things. But we absolutely cannot destroy that building. That would be sinful. There's got to be a way to save it, and if it's more expensive, so be it. I can't imagine our Main Street without that building. It's like the old lumber yard. Some great people saved that. It's part of the Northwood Main Street landscape. And you see pictures of Northwood from 100 years ago, and it's there. Just like our courthouse. And we can't just look at the dollars and cents right now. If we tear that building down 20 years from now, people are going to say, why in the world did they do that? And when I was on council, every vote I made was, what are they going to say 20 years from now? Thank God they did it, or was that ever stupid? We got to figure out a way to save it. All I've got to say.
Thank you. You, sir?
My name is Scott Anderson. I live next to the county shed in Northwood. And I got concerned when their drawings by the design company come out because they're all wrong, every one of them. They took no consideration to do a survey first. They went by beacon, which is a satellite picture, which can be up to 5 to 12 feet off on property lines because the pictures are taken at an angle. And they took no consideration for the people who live in that area. Some of their drawings block people off from coming out of their garage or driveways. They sit on city streets. I went to the city and they said there's been a long dispute about that being a street, but the county doesn't consider it a street. And so some of their drawings, they're crossing property lines. And they have to be considered, and they have to do a survey before any decisions are made.
Absolutely.
And my opinion, and it's only my opinion, I believe the county shed should go out by the conservation center or the recycle center.
Okay. Anybody else? Everybody's certainly welcome to speak if they like.
I don't know what stage planning you're in, so I don't know what to say. But do we get to hear some of the ideas first?
Absolutely. We'll go through those.
I tried looking at the little tiny pictures and I can't, and the video also, it's just too small scale, I can't see anything.
Sure. Okay.
Thanks for the opportunity, I will say that.
Yeah, you bet. Anybody else want to share anything? You can ask questions as we get into some of this. Okay,
Thank you.
you bet. Okay, so we're basically showing the FEH design Sparks site. So everything that you see here, it's going to be up for quite a while. We won't take it down. You'll be able to go to that. You'll see that there are a couple other projects that are up there too, but just look for the Worth County one. So since last time, there were several conversations about space needs. So we went back and talked with the departments actually on Monday of this week and made some square footage refinements. That's why Christy sent out a new kind of space needs assessment, which are these sheets. For example, the sheriff's and jail went down by about 800 gross square feet. Some of the other county departments went up a little bit. I think overall it was probably an increase of maybe 100 square feet total, something like that. But we did make some refinements, so it's a little bit different on the space needs side. It changed some of the budgetary numbers that we started to create based on the different ideas that were expressed that we sketched out conceptually.
Okay, you want to try and share your screen?
Thought I was.
You might have to jump on my Wi-Fi then.
AT&T Wi-Fi?
Yeah,
You?
sorry.
I'm on it.
Are you on it? Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, if you want to try and share your screen again.
How's that?
Perfect, thank you.
We do have a few people online, so we felt it's important for them to hear your comments too. That's why we keep offering you the microphone, just like me. Okay, for some of you who weren't able to participate in the Spark Work session the day before ATF meeting number 3 and number 4, we will go through these and kind of explain where they're at. So we asked you as a group, what do you want us to study? And we made a long list of things you wanted us to study, about 9 things. Well, during those meetings, more and more things we were asked to study. So we started at a very small scale. You can see 1 inch equals 100. These are just very diagrammatic sketches. This happens to be the first one, A, and the idea was, well, only do what's required and what's urgent on your assessment list. The buildings that are in orange are existing buildings. So this is the existing 3-level courthouse and the 1-level sheriff and jail space. We got red lines through it because that means we need to renovate it because there's so much work inside that is not compliant with the law or the code or the state requirements. Space needs is a big part of that, and this concept would show how big we'd have to expand the jail, for example. So when we looked at it at a little bit larger scale, 1 inch equals 40, you get a better sense of, okay, how much square footage do we need? The yellow that you see, that's just really circulation corridors. The red boxes, that's all new construction. So this shows what is required on the sheriff and jail side to both meet the state requirements for space and to bring the deputy spaces back out of the storefront building that's a block and a half away and back into this building for better efficiency of staff. And the courthouse space, and a space for the engineer and maintenance. So as you can see, what's required and urgent only is still a pretty large expansion if it's going to be all at that space. So this was done as a strategy to show you what's probably the most cost-effective strategy? To renovate the existing building and expand it. So that's option A.
Excuse me, as you go through, can you tell us what the expense is for these options? Like option A?
Question was, as we go through, can we talk about the expense? So did everybody pick up a sheet like this? If everybody picked up this sheet, there's a lot of options here. You asked us to study a lot of things. So what we tried to do is simplify that for you into categories. So you see courthouse, administrative, and courts. So that means there's not a jail or sheriff there. It's the administrative departments and the courts. It's option G, J, and O. And the courthouse, administrative, courts, sheriff, and jail. You'll see under there, there's option A, urgent and required only. That's $9,236,000 is what we've identified as a budget to do that work, if you did it all at once.
So that's the photo, the thing you just showed us is 9 million.
As you can see, this is a very conceptual diagram. These costs are based on site work and building square footage for costs from the last 12 months of construction from a national database of cost per square foot and a location factor of Worth County, Iowa. So from that, we can extrapolate what a budget needs to be once we add all those soft costs on as well. Engineering fees, design fees, printing costs, furniture, equipment, technology, site survey, geotech information, and lots of other costs. So the idea is it's a total project cost. These are not construction dollars. This is total project cost, okay? Everything bundled together. So you can follow along with this sheet and see what the related costs are.
So you're not considering that the price of lumber has gone sky high, because 12 months ago it wasn't as high as it is now. I mean, it is only a small portion of the overall, but
The comment was, so you're not considering the price of lumber has gone sky high.
right.
We are well aware of the price of construction materials. We have dozens of projects in design and construction right now.
12 months ago, though.
Yes. 2x4s are much more expensive than they were a year ago. Plywood, insulation, steel, glazing, aluminum, rigid insulation board, cabinetry, everything is much more expensive than it used to be. These numbers have a 3% inflation factor built into them. And we'll be providing those detailed cost sheets as a part of our report. So you'll be able to see like one 8.5 by 11 with a list of all the components that build this price. So we have not put in the crazy pricing that we're seeing right now. We've basically built in a 3% inflation with the numbers that we've seen for the last, not the last 2 months, but 12 months prior to that. Okay. So these are realistic budgets with healthy contingencies built in as well. Okay, this is the site that this gentleman was just talking about, where you can probably see his house. I have no idea where his house is on this map. But as you can see, there are multiple structures. I wouldn't be surprised if this one is built on a street right away. But these red lines are property lines.
That is where the inaccuracy is. That is not the right.
They could be up to 12 feet off.
Okay, so the information that we have, we generally assume these are property lines. This is a 1 inch equals 100 scale. So
Hey, Kevin, could I weigh in on that?
go right ahead.
So the beacon site is a representation of the legal, it is not the legal.
Correct, it says that on the beacon page.
Yep,
It-
yep.
And then I have been to the assessor's office and they haven't done updates in years.
That I'm
So
not,
as alleys have been vacated and bought up by people that haven't changed it.
And that's up to that office to do. And then I draw the representation of that on the Beacon side. So that, just to let everybody know, when you do something like that, we don't go by the lines on Beacon or anything like, it's just a representation of the legal, it's not the legal itself.
Well, what got us was the pictures that further Tom.
Yep, we're gonna be looking at those, and again, these are very diagrammatic. This is basically showing a sense of scale, replacing all those buildings that are all very, very old to a structure to house all the things that
This
you want
picture
to house.
alone cuts off 13th Street.
Yeah, yes it does.
There's homes in behind there.
And anything that is done, on any of these sites, certainly would not be done using Beacon as a base. There would be a site survey that identifies property boundaries, utilities, topography, easements, and so forth, before anything would go any further than this. And costs for those surveys and subsurface investigation is built into the budgets for every one of these. So this was a diagram for B at that high scale. And we looked at lots of different scenarios for what that might look like. Just gonna move this out of the way. So there's a lot of different ones. And when you look at this, you'll see, boy, they didn't do a cost for B. We did not do a cost, but based on what is shown here, that's about a $6 million total project budget. And when we had, I think it was meeting number 2 or so, somebody asked, well, what's the cost of that? And we said, that square footage might translate to about $2 million. It is way more than that. And you can see the size of this structure. If it were to be built at this size, which it may or may not be, and it may be done in pieces, that's what you're looking at for this kind of cost. And that price was developed for looking at this facility here on the site we're on, over there.
I have another question.
Yeah,
What type of building is it? Is it a mortar building? Is it a concrete building? What are we looking at for?
this building was laid out as a precast concrete slab building with the expectation that it would last 100 years. So it's precast concrete slab, insulated sandwich panels that are fabricated in Iowa with basically a gable metal roof on it. That's what was priced here. So these county buildings have to comply with state building codes. We can't put up a pole barn. We have to comply with energy efficiency codes and life safety codes for every building that's owned by any government in the state of Iowa. Okay? Excuse me? This could have lots of different types of roofs. We built many structures like this. What we put in this budget was a low-sloped gable roof with metal roof panels, just a long linear, there's an image of it in here too. But it could have been a flat, low-slope roof with a membrane. Could be a lot of different things. Could be an arched roof with different materials. But we tried to use kind of a baseline on this structure. So these are a lot of different layouts. This happens to show more of what the inside might look like, where all the different vehicles and pieces of equipment would be stored, the smaller staff areas, restrooms, the sign shop, the salt, sand, and mixed bunkers are outside. There's some yard storage outside, a wash bay, but basically all the individual pieces of equipment. And if we can keep most of that inside, you're going to get a lot longer use out of your equipment, your investments in equipment. You may not need to replace them as often. Yes?
I'm just curious to know, when you look at this particular picture, it shows that, again, it took away 13th Street and the continuation of our street. So are you gonna go back and redo, because it's hard to even consider any of these options when each one of them either infringes on our alley that we own, or totally cutting off 13th Street, and now Linda and Arnold Griffith can't even get into the driveway.
This picture shows that
So-
Arnold and Linda Griffith can't get in and out of their house, garage, or shed.
And they're down here to the south, right?
No, they're on the west side.
On the west side, over here?
Yeah, where
Yeah.
you're showing you're gonna have a.
Yeah, it could not be laid out like this. These are what people asked us to sketch. That's what we sketched. If you would have been here during our design workshop, you could have had an opportunity to ask us to sketch something. So we had 7 people working on
Were we
sketches.
notified? Were we invited?
It was in the
I don't know
newspaper.
who's next to it.
Yeah, it was in the newspaper, it was on the county website. We did everything we possibly could to reach out to people to let them know that this was happening. It was on social media.
You may use that at this point, but knowledge of where the actual property lines are also falls on the committee that is putting up your records.
Certainly. And as I said again, these are just diagrams. These are just showing the size of the building, the size of parking, what it would require to be able to put this type of a building on this site. Now, 14th Street runs through there too, but it's cut off now. Maybe it should run through as well. That's up for you to decide. This is all about you giving input back to the county. So I'm glad you're here to give that input. Christy's writing everything down, and the meeting's being recorded as well. So by all means, continue to give input and ask questions. Yes?
My opinion is that they moved the garage completely out of this location
Sure.
to out in the county where the recycle center is. So 14th and 13th can go straight through and our town can grow.
Okay.
The homes and developments on the north end of town can't grow because they can't hook into the sewer system.
Okay. So then the next thing we were asked to look at was county conservation. County conservation right now inhabits 2 small buildings that are basically filling that little lot. It's not ADA compliant. It has to be. The entrance, restroom, it doesn't have any of the things that it needs. Plus, it's short on space. If you've been in there, you'll know. So we tried to look at, well, what would it take to add some space and make the building handicap accessible? That's what this diagram represents. We did not price this out because honestly, we don't think this is a feasible solution. And nobody who participated in any of the meetings ever voted for this or said, yeah, we like that, please study that one further. So it did not get studied any further than that. Here's that recycling site that some of you are in love with as opportunities for where buildings might go. The thing that I think is important to recognize is that the county doesn't control this whole site. The state actually controls this whole section. So the county has control of only this piece. But of course, as designers and people responding to other folks' ideas, that never stops us. So we showed some drawings of structures that might sit on the state-directed piece. Option D, this is county conservation D, with a new building to replace the structures that you have. You'd probably sell off that piece to somebody else in town, so that's D. And we did price this out, D and D1, that's about $2.1 million, you see on the sheet. And of course, this is a diagram. Yes, sir?
My name's Corey Blue, I'm the current mayor of Kansas. 7 years ago, I believe, county conservation came to all the city councils presenting that they wanted to build a structure out at the recycle center. And I believe the project was only $1 million at that time. and it was put to vote by the county, and nobody wanted the property taxes to go up so it failed. And it was a cheap project. So people do not think future.
Yeah,
Just wanted to point that out.
yep. So this is that same option with a little more detail drawn.
What is the type of building?
The question was, what building type did you look at for this? This one is priced as a 6-inch metal stud with insulation and continuous insulation to meet the energy codes, a sloped asphalt roof on the building. It's not a large building in scale. It's certainly not as large as the one we were just looking at, or the courthouse, or any of those other departments. So this is a fairly standard, basic building. With a brick, with a brick veneer on the outside.
I understand that the conservation already has a building out there. Can that be made use of?
Conservation has a shed out here, I believe it's this structure here. We have a conservation.
Yeah,
There he is.
it's being used right now. That's where all of the equipment is stored.
Well, I mean, can it be used in this, that kind of, we were talking about putting that equipment into this new building that you were putting up.
The new building is not really, it's not replacing this one. It's replacing the two.
It's replacing what's in town.
But I mean, when you talk about using that with the road constructor, the road maintenance people, that always,
We did have another option. Somebody asked, what if we move county conservation in with the roads structure? So we do have another option that looks at that.
but this one would still be, you're still using that then?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the storage.
Yeah, this is the recycling building up here. This is county conservation, and this is emergency EMA building, and those are all in full use. Those structures are all in full use. So this would replace the two structures that are in Northwood. Yes,
Can you use your pointer again? It didn't show up here.
my pointer? This building right here?
Which direction is north?
North is up.
Okay,
North is up. So this is the recycling building. This is out in the country.
yes, I know that.
Okay, that's the recycling building. This one is the county conservation structure.
I don't see a pointer.
It's there.
Here, my pointer? I'm sorry if you can't see it. Yeah, it's right here.
Okay. Hard to see.
Okay. And as I said, this one looked at actually moving county roads, thank you, moving county roads over here as well on this site. Where the footprint of county roads is, it is on the state property, not the county property. Does that mean you can't get it? Maybe, maybe not. It's a possibility. But that was another concept somebody asked us to look at. Okay. So this is another site diagram of that same thing. Here are those three existing structures. There is a septic field out here on the east side of the recycling building. So obviously there would be one for the conservation building as well and secondary roads. Because we're not connected to a sewer out there. But this is the size of that secondary road structure. What it might look like on the site.
This is the fence. That's the fence, in case I missed it earlier.
So this is basically a larger scale layout of what's inside that structure. As you can see, there are a few, these represent overhead doors coming in, but primarily it's a drive-through facility. So you pull your vehicles in and then you can drive out on the other end or come out through this right here or a wash bay here. And these are the maintenance hoist and parts, rooms, and so on. There's what it might look like on the outside. This was just the idea that kind of went along with that big structure, with that sloped roof, precast concrete walls. Same drawing, basically, slightly different configuration. This one came as kind of a culmination from a lot of comments. Can we get it all on the county's property? And we said, boy, if you moved the recycling building, which is a pole barn, if you basically cut it off at the ground, formed a new foundation and moved it onto that foundation, and actually built the county conservation structure over here so it's connected to the other county conservation storage building, you could get secondary roads in here with plenty of turning radius for the large trucks and vehicles and all the parking that you need and not have to cross the line. So this was created at the end of the 2 days, and I think a lot of people really like this option. E2 got about 15 points worth of voting on E2. So it was one that people really liked, or preferred, I would say, at least the participants. So this is another kind of layout drawing of what that might look like inside, the big one.
Okay, I have a question. So you're looking at spending $2 million more to put the big building on the west, move the recycling center, because it's harder than talking to the state of Iowa and trying to procure a few extra feet of ground. I mean, ground at $10,000 an acre, whatever.
Would anyone from the county like to speak to that? Because actually it's going to be a very long and expensive process, is what we've been told.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. Anybody in the county want to talk to that?
Jim?
What it is the county actually owns the property. It was purchased with state and federal funds.
Yeah.
And so that has to be paid back at current market value.
Okay.
And then besides being paid back at the current market value to expand the existing site, then you have to fill in a potential wetland to do so.
And that's a federal problem.
No, we probably can't fill in the wetland is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
that's what we need to know.
Right, because
It might be cheaper to spend the $2 million more is what you're saying.
Right, because you've been to the site and you know how, once you go through the recycling center, how it goes straight down into the pond.
Yep.
And that's what essentially you'd just be encroaching on that pond. So it may be regulation that would keep us from doing it, not cost at all.
Okay, well, but that is a question I have.
Yep.
Okay, so.
Yes, sir?
You could talk to Gordon to see if they sell off some property to the south of that.
An adjacent property owner to the south? Yeah, that's a possibility too.
It'd be a lot easier and simpler.
And there may be other properties somewhere else in the vicinity that could be acquired as well. So these are just some ideas that demonstrate what the cost might be for these different scenarios. Obviously, if there's land acquisition, we need to build the cost of the land acquisition into these budgets as well. And that probably means phase 1 archaeological evaluations too, and maybe phase 2. Yes. When you get a greenfield site and it's going to be used for a government use, you have to go through a phase 1 archaeological and environmental study. And if anything is identified, you have to move to a phase 2. Yeah. Okay. No. So this was another scenario of how that site might lay out if you move the recycling to the other end. F was that idea, what if conservation was also moved on the same site with the shop and the garage? What if that building was divided up so the roads shop was combined with conservation so there could be some efficiency in space so you wouldn't have to double up on some spaces like restrooms or a conference room or storage space? Option G then was basically, let's renovate the courthouse. This is a concept that says, let's renovate the courthouse, and as you see on this sheet, without having the jail and sheriff there. Jail and sheriff move somewhere else, and this is just the judicial space and all the departments, and bringing the treasurer out of the building they're on Main Street, so there's more efficiency into this building. You can also see that the maintenance garage and the engineering office stays right where it's at in this concept. That saves some dollars as well, obviously. This red box is the footprint of square footage that you would need to add, and you'd have to renovate the existing jail and sheriff's department to give you the square footage that you need. And of course, you've got a lower level and an upper level on the historic courthouse section. And you get a sense of how that fills up the site as well. H is, the idea is, what if we built a new sheriff and jail on the site as a new structure? Once that's complete, we move the deputies out of their building and the sheriff and jail into this new structure, and then we're able to renovate the existing sheriff and jail space and let the other courthouse departments expand into that. That's the idea that's represented in this diagram. What we found is there's still not enough square footage. To be able to do that, we would need this much more square footage to meet all those requirements. This is the jail side and the sheriff's side up here. The historic courthouse structure is right here, and this orange is the jail and sheriff structure. And this was a test fit of how we would fit the spaces into the building and into the upper level to create more of a kind of a public, more of a lobby space here. Some of the concerns we heard about this was it doesn't meet the goal for success that was identified to provide separation of courts and jail from the public and other services. Because if you're bringing a defendant from the jail to the courts, you're bringing them right through the public lobby. Or you're putting them in a squad car, and driving it around the block and bringing them into a sally port over on this side into the back side of the courts, which you can do, and it's been done in many places. So that is how that H fits. And you can see where H kind of lands on this chart as well. It's just under 14 million on a total project budget. So here we are in Kensett. You get a sense of what this site really looks like. Here's the community center. Here's the ball diamond. There's a property line down here somewhere. And a lot of green space and parking. So the idea was, what if the jail and the sheriff's department was over there? What would that look like? How would that fit on the site? What kind of impact would that have? So this is a diagram that shows the idea. This is more of a realistic layout of what the footprint would be if it were constructed here on a one-story structure. So you can see the existing structures and how they relate to that. This is more of a layout inside the floor plan, and certainly it is not the perfect floor plan. It's a long way from that. But to make sure that the circulation works and the footprint works and matches the program of spaces that was identified. Yes, sir?
So go back to your first drawing where the sheriff's department is there. So you're hooked up to the parking lot. Are you planning on moving our city well?
This is drawn right on top of the city well, and after the gentleman drew this, I said, you realize this is sitting right on top of this building right here?
Yep.
So no, that would not be the intent. This is just a diagram to show how it might work. We would never put it on top of that unless we wanted to add a lot more money to the budget.
Just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I pointed it out as well. Someone said, what if you connected it to this building? And we heard, boy, please don't do that. I don't know that There's a downside to connecting it to the building. There might be an upside. It might provide some more opportunity depending on how the training room space that's inside the sheriff and jail might provide an additional meeting space, even more flexibility and use for this building. So it really depends on how it's done. But that's what that one represents. This is a very conceptual diagram of what it might look like for the massing on the site. And it doesn't show the well either, but it is still there. Okay. Option J says, what if we took down the courthouse and we just built a new courthouse on the courthouse square? This is a courthouse without the jail. It has the courts, the courtrooms, and all the departments. There's a dashed line on the lot that shows where the existing structures are. One benefit to this is you could build this whole structure, and then once it's done, you could move everybody in, and then remove the older structures. So that's the idea there. And you get a sense of the massing and scale of that. These are interior layouts of what those spaces might look like, with the courtrooms up above, and all the other spaces down below. Option K, this option K studied, well, what if we keep the courthouse and just wrap around it? And then there's also some versions that keep the courthouse and the jail piece and wrap around it. So this one actually shows the 2-story or 3-level courthouse structure and then the 1-story structures connected. Expanding the jail really at the same location, providing a new judicial wing. This whole box here is judicial. And then auditor, treasurer, assessor, recorder, and kind of a central lobby space, kind of service area with access to all those departments. And then upstairs, supervisors, engineering, IT, and GIS. And then downstairs is really storage. Some of the remote storage opportunity would be down there. So this is option K. Again, you can see that it does not leave a lot of room for a parking lot on the site. You got about 25 spaces in that parking lot. So what we showed was, what if you just put angled spaces right off the street as one idea? You get just as many spaces, and it's really not too far from the door. So that was an idea there. These are more detailed layouts of the upper level and the basement level of the existing courthouse. You would have to add a stair to the building to connect all those levels. You already have an elevator. This would be a new stair that would be added to make that part of the building more serviceable, well, code compliant. This is a concept that says, what if we only kept the historic piece and tore down the 35-year-old structure or so that was the jail and the sheriff office space, and built all new sheriff and jail and judicial. So it's very much the same layout, but it was done to kind of, let's test out the price between K and K1. And I don't know if we got prices on both of those. Yeah, we did. So you can see the difference in price there. Here's another one that's similar, but it flips some of the spaces around so that you could build the whole jail piece, move out of it, you build the judicial piece separately too. K1 Prime, and a more kind of central lobby with a more dramatic entrance on the west side of the building that leads you to the lobby of the judicial, and then a central kind of core to assessor, treasurer, auditor, and recorder. So it's just another version of that. That's a layout of what it would look like. This would be a pretty big building, mostly on one story, one floor. This gives you a real sense of the mass and scale of that structure. Right in the middle is your historic courthouse piece. And you can see the end of your existing sheriff and jail. And this is all the other square footage that's needed. That's K2. Option L is an L-shaped option to basically build all new on that block and take down all the structures that are there now. How it might lay out, how you could build it with only tearing down the engineering building first, and once it's built, move into it. Here's a L flip to the other side that kind of merges in with the jail, takes down the historic courthouse structure. Here's the layout of what that would look like on the inside. I'm sorry.
Well, so it's really hard to hear the audio on your recordings, but so in this one, they have to move everything out and rent space and then move everything back in.
No.
Well, that's
On this
what I'm
one,
asking.
no.
On the one where you were tearing everything.
Right. So everything is built new, but you would have to tear down engineering and the maintenance building that's in the corner of the lot.
Right.
So you'd have to move out of that and find a space for the engineering team and place to store your lawnmowers and stuff.
I just wanted to know if the expenses of renting, moving were part of the bid also.
They are built, this is not a bid.
Well, not a bid.
Let's use the terminology budget. Yes. In the concepts that require space to be rented, we use $10 a square foot as a budgetary number to rent space for a period of time. It's $10 per square foot per year is not an unreasonable rental cost for office space in places where there are spaces available. As soon as there's space available to rent. Those are built into the budget as well. Yes?
So the idea of a parking lot on Central Avenue, I think it looks terrible. When you see from Central Avenue,
So for those that can't hear, this lady says she does not like the parking in the front green front yard of your courthouse square. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
You showed on one of those that you'd added 25 parking spaces on the north side. Could you also add them on the, like on the east side or something to increase parking without having to, build a big parking lot in the middle of the road?
Yeah, you can add them all the way around if you want to. The reason we jumped on the north side on that one option is because we ended up pushing an entrance up there, and it looks like you've got more distance between the property line and the curb currently. That doesn't mean there can't be parking on the county property as opposed to just the street property. So you could put them on all sides if you wanted to. And that personally would be my preference, but this is your county and your facility, but it's up to you. So these are the other L scenarios. It could look like anything. It could have historic character to it with gables and dormers and towers and brick and stone, or it could be a more contemporary looking building if you wanted it to. This was a refinement on that L.1 that kind of flipped the entrance into the court space so that the departments were separate from the court areas, so there was more space in the lobby. Say you're calling a jury. This is a much more contemporary looking structure, what that might look like and how it fills the site. M is, what if we did the structure for secondary roads, but you put engineering there and maintenance as well. And it may be hard to see, but the little box on the end with the ENG, that's the square footage of that piece. And you can see it's a pretty small piece compared to the rest. Another different scenario how it might fit. And then how it might work into the plan. And then option N, this was an option that was studied by another consultant a few years back of building a whole new structure in the back and then leaving the courthouse kind of standalone up front and then tearing down the jail and the later additions. This option does not put anything in the courthouse. It kind of leaves it open. and builds all new for everything else. So you got sheriff and jail, and then all the county office departments, and all the court facility spaces are up above on the second floor. That's pretty much what was diagrammed at that time. Yes?
I don't know how old that study is, but have the codes, especially for the sheriff, changed? I mean, is that a viable option at all?
That's why we wanted to study it. The question was, I'm not sure how old that is and what codes have changed. Is it viable? Yes, it is viable.
Okay.
It's possible you could do this.
It's still up to code.
It could be constructed to code, yes. Yep. Okay, that's N. And that's how it might lay out inside. You can see the square footage in all those spaces. So then after the workshop, we created O, P, and Q. So this is option O. We added these to our Spark site so folks could see them in advance of today. This is a new kind of layout that you hadn't seen before, but the idea is sheriff and jail is somewhere else. Maybe it's in Kensett, who knows? Maybe it's somewhere else, maybe there's another piece of property that nobody pointed out to us, but somewhere not on the square. And it says, okay, if the jail and sheriff aren't here, but the courts are, what do we need to add to this as a two-story piece? So we get a two-story kind of cohesive structure that looks like the historic courthouse, but just more of it. And that's the footprint that you would need for that. It's got the maintenance and engineering spaces. It's got each of the departments. It still probably has some complexity of either the bottom floor levels, because the historic courthouse is up half, several steps. So we'd have to figure that out. Do we elevate the entire site so that it's handicap accessible, so the levels line up? There's a lot of ways to skin the cat on that. Not the way you skin cats. So that's what that might look like in scale on the property. And no, it would not have to have parking lot there, but we built into the budget constructing a certain number of parking spaces, whether they're constructed up here on the curbs or they're constructed here, they're constructed somewhere. So that's option O. And based on the comments we heard, we thought there'd probably be a lot of folks who would like that. Option P. We thought, well, somebody asked, would secondary roads fit here at Kensett? Well, by golly, we thought we better check that out. So we did this diagram, and it looks like, boy, it would. Again, this is just a test fit, but that structure could fit here. Don't know if you want it on the edge of town, maybe. But you wouldn't have to move the recycling building, and you could get secondary roads to fit there. Any questions about that? Since this is a new one as well, it was something somebody asked, and there was like 4 people left in the room after the last meeting. Okay. And then Q.
There's a question over there.
Well, I was just gonna ask if the option was ever to put the sheriff out there at the recycling center.
We did not diagram that, but.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But it certainly would fit. We know what the price is to do it. So generally, it's gonna be about that same cost as what it would be to construct it at this site. Generally. But we would have to add some more utility costs out there.
Okay.
Yeah, utilities that already are here in some fashion that we wouldn't have to replicate. So this is option Q. This is again saying, what if we just kept the historic part of the courthouse and we built the jail and everything on that lot and reoriented things so it's really, the jail is kind of inside the core of the building, and then it's the sheriff's department, and then over here you have all the other departments, and the judicial is up above. So that's option Q. And You can see the pricing on all those. They're not too far off from each other under that second category. So that's all the diagrams. So then your group also, probably can't read these because there's so many options. Maybe you can. This is the criteria chart. We asked you, how are you going to decide? How do you want to decide what you think is most important? How are you going to evaluate all the options? And you came up with 8 criteria. One of them was retain the historic courthouse. And that got a weighting factor with people voting in the room of 7.2 out of 10. And then the next one was, what's the effect on the downtown buildings? We want to preserve those. That got a weighting factor of 5.0 out of 10 as a level of importance that people who participated felt. Safety and accessibility got a weighting factor of 9.4. Is it fundable and justifiable? Got a weighting factor of 10.0. Everybody said that's absolutely, support that, that's a 10. Can we accomplish it with the short-term funds that are available? That got a weighting factor of 6.7. Can we accomplish it in the long term with funds that might be available long term? And that's like 20 years long term. That got a 2.8 weighting factor, because I think most people felt we don't know what the long-term funds might be. And then energy efficiency, carbon footprint, ongoing operating costs, received a 6.1 as kind of the highest level out of 10. And then convenience. So a lot of when we talked about convenience as a goal, convenience and efficiency means if we locate all the departments together, we don't need to have a mechanical room in every single building. We don't need a set of bathrooms in every single building. We don't need a meeting room in every single building. So that's part of the convenience. Plus, these departments talk to each other all the time, continuously during the day. And when they're spread out, it doesn't work very well. Like all the county mail goes to the treasurer's office, right? So then they've got to distribute that from there. So there's a lot of inefficiencies in the way you are. But when we talked about convenience for somebody like a patron who's walking in to go see the assessor or the auditor, and they get sent over to the treasurer, and then they have to go back to the assessor, whatever it may be, people didn't feel inconvenienced by that. Those of you who participated felt that's not really important to me, so it got a weighting factor of 0.5. So then our design team went through these, because some of these are black and white, and scored every option. And you know, it's not totally scientific, but the scoring kind of says, well, which ones didn't score very well? Well, option C didn't score very well. Option H didn't really score very well. But a lot of the others, the most they could get is 47.7, and there's a lot of them in 44, 46, 47, 40, 45. There's a lot of them there. Q didn't score very well either. It only got a 29. So there's a couple 22s. The L's scored really well. So what we're just trying to do is kind of separate the ones that really don't meet your goals and your decision-making criteria. So C and H and L and Q, for some reason we're not don't meet these as we scored them. So that means you can look at a lot of other ones that seem to make sense and match your goals and your criteria. So then the next thing we did, we put this chart together to try to organize all these different ideas. And what you see is, well, we've got the administrative office pieces, all those departments, GIS, IT, supervisors, treasurer, assessor, recorder, engineering, auditor. We're calling that administration. And then you've got the judicial side, the courts, the county attorney, the judge space, the jury spaces, all those spaces. And there are some code requirements there that you're supposed to be meeting that you aren't. And then we've got sheriff and jail combined as one unit. And obviously, there's a lot of square footage need there, and inefficiencies there with having the deputies located in another space. Then there's county roads. County roads is a tough one because it's not just the county roads that are in Northwood. You have multiple sites where you have county roads. We're not really talking about consolidating all of them together in one place because there's probably efficiencies in having multiple locations. But just what we looked at for county roads and studying that. And then, of course, you've got county conservation. So those are the 6 different departments. So what we want you to do tonight, and you can give us as much input as you like, but we would like you to be able to tell your county supervisors and your department heads what your priorities are for these different spaces. Which ones do you think are most important to be addressed first? There's funding available to address some of this work. So we're going to ask you to use the little ballots that Christy's got here that she's going to hand out. That lists administrative, county conservation, county roads, engineering and maintenance, jail and sheriff, and then judicial. We want you to rank them. Tell us which ones you think the county should address first, second, down to 6th. So if they're getting feedback from you, who've gone through this process, to tell them which ones do you think should be addressed first. Now, we had some participants 2 weeks ago who said, well, we don't know. Well, we're trying to tell you what the needs are, what the scope is, but these are your facilities. We want to know what's most important to you. If you're just talking about where are the greatest deficiencies, well, there are many deficiencies. Got the greatest deficiencies related to cost are probably sheriff and jail. You have significant deficiencies when it comes to county roads. You've got significant deficiencies within your courthouse building that need to be addressed. You can benefit from efficiencies of being able to bring your departments together. The county conservation buildings, some of you may feel that's really, really important, or you may feel like, that's the back burner. That's up to you. These are your facilities. But certainly you can see the scale of costs of these different categories, one to another. Then what we're going to ask you to do is we want you to rank those, but we want you to write on the back of the one that you feel is the top priority for you, for the county, which one of these options within that category is your preference. So if you said, boy, sheriff and jail is my priority, it's not just option I, because sheriff and jail is addressed in A, H, K, L, N, and Q as well. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Chris will pass out these ballots if you need pens or pencils. We got a few more. Yes?
So you say there's funding available. Can you give us an idea about what you mean by funding available? I mean, as far as, I know there's TIF money that was talked about. I mean, that might make some people's mind up, about the funding.
So I don't know the details about that, but the county supervisor that was here last time during the meeting explained, there's somebody here that can talk to that? Oh, boy, I couldn't even see him. He expressed that there could potentially be about $10 million available through TIF. What we heard last time was there could potentially be about $10 million available through TIF related to the windmills, but there are lots of other needs in the county, like roads and bridges and things, that could potentially be available that don't increase taxes. That would probably require some bonds being sold to access those dollars at one time, but they'd be paid off from TIF revenues. Okay? Yeah. That's the scale that you have available without any tax increase. Some of you look skeptical, but those are the dollars that are available that you've got access to potentially. So clearly, your supervisors are going to start making investments, and they want to make sure they're making those investments in the place that you prioritize and match the goals of the communities. So that's one of the primary reasons we're going through this. We don't want the county supervisors and the departments don't want to make investments and end up finding that you want to do something else 2 years from now or 5 years from now, and that was money out the window, because you end up spending it twice if you don't make the investments appropriately. Somebody might say, let's fix up that engineering and maintenance building, or let's fix up our county conservation building, and then 5 years from now, realize we just have to build a new structure to replace those. Yes?
I'm sorry, Sheriff. Locating the building in Kansas, how does that change your response time to a lot of your calls out to the casino?
Response time, you gotta realize that the guys don't sit at the office. They're out patrolling. So it won't make any difference because it'll depend on where they're at in the county at that time, just like they would in the other days.
Did everybody hear that? So response time for the sheriff's department is different than, say, response time for a fire truck. Or even,
Because my guys are out mobile.
right, because they're mobile, they're already all over the place. And Kansas is pretty centrally, geographically located.
It is.
Yeah. Yes, sir?
Talking about building a jail in Kansas. I remember back when they were talking about building a central school. Here in this Kansas didn't have the right. Our department and other things, so they couldn't build a school there. I'm not hanging Craigslist, this is what they said.
Sure.
I'm asking you, the liability with the jail. What about the rescue squad and everything else they may need here?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not throwing them out with
No, that needs to be considered. So for the folks online, for anybody who's online who didn't hear that, the gentleman said, if there's a structure built here, like the jail in Kensett, several years back, a central school was talked about possibly at Kensett, and one of the negatives of that was maybe you don't have the infrastructure or the access to emergency services.
Can I respond?
Sure.
We have a sewer system now, so we do have adequate services. That was the big holdup, was everybody was on a septic tank. Now,
I don't want you to take it negative.
no, I'm not.
Nope, those are good questions. Very good questions.
You know, the centrally located, you know, I see that, but you want to get our county in a situation where there's some huge lawsuit because something happens, because we don't have the adequate help to help whoever, inmates or whatever.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Strange world.
And there's another project that's not even on our list, and that's the potential ambulance service. And someone suggested that, boy, if the sheriff's department was here, maybe the ambulance service is co-located with them here too. It's kind of a central location. So that might overcome some of that. I don't know. Yes?
I mean, what are you talking about? What about moving the inmates? If I understood right, when you built that jail, the one we have now, you wanted it over there so you could get into the courthouse without taking them across the
So
street.
that's another great question about moving the inmates, and what a lot of people don't understand is this has been happening for a while, but a lot of the courts are being done virtually, electronically. And now with COVID, that's even more prevalent. So you still do have to do that, but not as much as you used to.
Well, it's a safety thing, I would.
Yeah, it would be. We can put it anywhere. Sheriff would be happy to have a new facility anywhere, I'm sure. But if you talk to him, he'll say he's not going to benefit because someday he's going to retire.
Right.
Yeah. Other questions as you're thinking through this?
Of course they do.
Or suggestions that people want to make related to any of your thoughts? Yes, sir.
Is this going to go to podiums?
depends on how much TIF money they use. And it depends on how the thing progresses, how many years you're gonna spread it out over.
Are you sure you got this money for TIF? You give them, you do give them what, abatement on them? Not you yourself, but previous.
So this is essentially the abatement expiring.
2 weeks ago, that laid it all out for us.
The TIF, tax increment financing, means you abate taxes for a period of time, but those times are running out. So as those times run out,
He laid it out to 2038. And there's money there. There's new ones coming on.
Which you guys didn't have something like that off here a few years back.
okay, is everybody done? Well, I got a pen right here. Anybody else need a pen?
No, that's not the way it works.
Yeah.
Payments are taxes.
No. There's copies. Okay. I'll pick up the ballots.
They need to be on this side.
I'll take the ballots.
I tried. I should just replace them. It is now on my list again. George, which the things? The list is getting.
Is there more to me? Oh, I think I have a closing remark. Closing remark.
You do not have to put your names on these. No. There's 3 more over here. Okay, while the last couple folks are finishing up with that, and there are folks online that are able to do this as well. Got a little remark here. The result of your input. The results of this, we will post the results of this up here as well. And then we're going to take everything that's created and put it into a booklet.
Nice.
And it'll be a virtual booklet as well that the county will have in hard copies. So people can look at a copy of that, or you can look at it virtually. It'll probably be posted on the county's website. All that information combined. We're also going to be taking that information and creating more of a county. There's about 30 of you here tonight. I think the population is a little bigger than that. We're going to create a virtual survey to get responses from more people, kind of inform them more about the process, let them know how this process went, and kind of what the outcomes have been so far, and get a broader base of input, so that the supervisors even get a broader view of input from folks. The information that you have put on this is going to go to the supervisors as kind of recommendations from this group, the advisory task force. But we want to write down any other recommendations that you might have beyond this as a group. And Christy's going to come over here and write this. Her handwriting is so nice. And she likes the giant magic marker too. It's all yours. Okay, so we don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if you have something that you feel should be a recommendation from this group, we're going to ask if at least half the people agree with that recommendation just by a show of hands. They can be simple things. Obviously, we know what the goals are. The goals for success are identified here. So is there anything else you'd like to add to this as a recommendation? Yes.
I just want to make a comment because I have a really old mother, and she doesn't live here, so it's not valid for her. But I've taken her to the courthouse to get her driver's license. And when you're 94 years old and you're in a lot of pain, walking up and down the halls of a huge building where they located everything together is very difficult. You know what? It's really nice to drive up to the Main Street building, walk 10 feet in and get my driver's license or pay my tags or pay my land, taxes. It's just really handy. It's also handy to go to the other building and just run in there and get
So
something.
you're saying convenience is important.
It's very convenient for me, but a big spread out one-story building that the people that want new offices want may not be the best thing for
I'm really
somebody
glad
that's
to,
older.
thank you for that. I'm really glad to hear that because very few people supported convenience when we went through the weighting of the criteria before.
If somebody that has difficulty walking around the large one-story building wouldn't help.
Yeah.
I like to.
That's why convenience scored 0.5 out of 10.
Well, that's because it is convenient, the little building.
It feels
back
convenient now,
downtown.
yeah.
And the
Okay.
parking that's really close to the little building.
So we'd like to make who'd like to make convenience as a recommendation to the supervisors?
I have a question, a clarification, when she's saying, are we talking about opposite things?
Yeah, we are talking about
So you
opposite
can't just
things.
say.
She's talking about, no, they can both be done. They are not opposite things.
Okay, but if she's talking about it's nice to have the little building here and here.
That's what I'm
and you
saying
say,
is
oh, well,
convenient.
not now, but
It's not so much that it's a little building, it's that you can just go right to that spot. You can design, any of these buildings to provide that convenience.
If we all call it convenience, that means two totally different things, so we're
Yes.
not going to vote on convenience.
That's right.
Could you make it a drive-up service like the drugstores are doing nowadays?
Drive up for drive up? Yes, sir.
You know, I remember when the stuff was over in the courthouse as a kid going with my dad, and they assessed it to whatever, get your driver's license. I actually don't mind going up to the old bank to get my license and pay my farm taxes. It's easier than it used to be to go to the courthouse, to go down in the basement, no, I forget where it was all at. And that's a nice old building there on Main Street. I don't disagree with it, but it's handy.
That's right.
You know, it looks like to me with this, it is a bunch of kids with a lot of money in their pocket, and they can't figure out which way they're gonna spend it. I mean, from a farmer's point of view, I hear about the different building stuff, but the farmer ends up paying it. The town gets off it, The courthouse is beautiful, I agree with you, Don, but why didn't they take care of it? These four supervisors we got now, it ain't their fault, they weren't there. It isn't their fault. But now, like Don there, I said, with the historically, why do you guys gotta keep track of our courthouse? I mean, the historical people are good. But to have that building just rot away, and now all of a sudden you wanna keep it, maybe it's too far.
The building is structurally sound.
You know what I mean?
We've been through the building, it is structurally sound.
So you think you could actually fix it nevertheless?
We believe so, yes.
That's what I'm asking.
Well, Christy and I are architects from Dubuque.
Yeah, I know.
If you've been to Dubuque, there's a lot of historic buildings, and we've been involved in a lot of them. So not every building can be saved. We did the new Mitchell County Courthouse. That building was not structurally sound. I was not safe in there. You could not, it was not safe at all. And when the backhoe hit it, we have the video, when the backhoe hit it, the whole thing collapsed.
So what actually happened to our courthouse with the new roof on it? Didn't they install that roof, or was it always leaking after they got done?
It's just minor things that happen incrementally over time where moisture starts to get inside the wall cavity, at flashings and wall caps and downspouts. So in old buildings that are masonry walls with plaster on the inside, that moisture's captured and the plaster starts to crumble. Okay, so, and then somebody went in the 70s and put that 1970s paneling over the plaster. Well, now that paneling gets wet, it's not in too good a shape either. So, 50 years ago there was remodeling, and they probably thought at the time it was a great thing to do. It's not what we would do today in a historic building like that. But you would gut that entire building. I mean, the building was built obviously before computers, and there's all kinds of infrastructure that needs to be updated in the building. And if you were going to do this project properly, you would gut that building out, leave all the structural walls and things, try and keep some of the detail in the stair. And there's not a lot of historic detail inside the building. It just isn't. But you would try to keep as much as you could of the structurally outside, and as we said, it's structurally sound. But it's up to the entire community if you're going to take the approach of renovate and preserve or build new. So we've got the input of this group, and we're going to get input from the larger group. Yes, sir.
I'm just making a quick comment about there's a lot of differences on both sides, but in terms of keeping money in the community, you renovate a building, you're going to have, I would throw a number out, but it's incredibly 3-4 times as much money stays in the community because it's so labor intensive. You're not building a new building where 90% is coming from manufactured in China, and you're doing all this with new construction. New construction, most of your money's going out of town, maybe out of the country. That's another thing just to keep in mind.
I think the gentleman's point is, you renovate a building, there is a much higher cost in labor than there is in material. And you've got an asset that's already there. I mean, Christy and I have both served as chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission for the city of Dubuque. So we are preservationists, but it is not our job to identify every building that should be saved or which one should go and which one should be saved. We're here to listen to you, what you want. But the truth is, materials are hard to come by and they're expensive right now. And labor is hard to come by as well, because every contractor we work with, you can't find people to do the work. And the labor shortage is causing delays as much as material shortage. And it's both aspects. Other things that people would want to add as recommendations that are kind of beyond these goals for success. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your time and your involvement in this. We'll continue to email out the results of that voting. And when we do send the surveys out to the whole community, please ask others, your neighbors and family, to submit. You can do it virtually, you can do a hard copy, either way. So that'll probably happen in June, late June, early July.